Welcome to the Personal Injury Marketing Minute, where we quickly cover the hot topics in the legal marketing world. I'm your host, Lindsey Busfield. There are several ways to go about getting a steady stream of new leads. We obviously talk a lot about digital marketing, referrals, and developing grassroots relationships, but acquiring another law firm is a quick, though expensive, way to get more leads immediately coming through the door. Obviously, acquiring another law firm is expensive and somewhat complicated. Beyond the financials, there are the human aspects to acquiring a firm as well. Things like corporate culture come into play, along with how involved the previous owner is to be with the transition of the firm. However, if it is strategically incorporated into your firm's growth strategy, there can be great benefits to this investment. Jon Groth of Groth Law Firm joins us today to discuss his acquisition of another personal injury law firm and how that helped him to grow his caseload. Thank you so much for joining us, Jon.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this. This is kind of exciting. I've been
Oh, yeah. Well,
listening
we're
to your
so glad to
podcast,
have you
so thank
here.
you.
Thank you. Well, can you start by giving us a bit of background on your practice and how you got into personal injury law?
Sure. I've been a lawyer since 2000. I graduated law school in 2000. I wanted to do a bunch of different other things, and I luckily got a clerkship at a personal injury law firm in Chicago. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, get my suit on, drive down there. From Milwaukee to Chicago is a good hike, hour plus at least. So I would do that, and then got to learn the ins and outs of personal injury law and thought that was a lot better than my other options, which would be criminal law or divorce or such. So I was kind of all in and took a bunch of trial advocacy type classes while in law school, and then worked for a general practice firm in Wisconsin, right out of law school, doing all their trial type stuff. But I got to learn all the different aspects of law. So I did a bunch of different things, but always went back to my trial work. And then I was recruited from a different firm, and I left and went to work for that firm, which was only personal injury. So then from 2000 and early 2003, late 2002, until I started this firm in 2010, I only did personal injury law. And then I found my niche, and the rest is history. And since 2003, really, I've only helped people who are injured because of other people's negligence.
And that's a great place to be. And so many of our listeners kind of have similar stories where they, have gone through their path, have started their own firm, and have really found their passion in helping people who have been impacted by negligence. And so with your practice, clearly one of the biggest things to keep a law firm thriving is generating leads. So how has your practice focused on generating leads in previous years?
Boy, originally back in 2010, I had the goal of just being a trial lawyer and being the trial lawyer for other law firms. So I would kind of be like maybe Abraham Lincoln and riding the circuit and go from firm to firm across the state and say, hey, if you have any cases you want to try, give them to me. Back then I had literally postcards that I think I have them around here somewhere and I probably should get them framed, but there were postcards that said, if you need a trial lawyer, call me. At any point in the case, if it's a matter of a few weeks, give me a call. I'll step in and I'll try the case with you. I'll be first chair. You can be second chair. You can handle all the client communication. So it's still your case, but I'll be the one who handles the trial. And that's how I kind of got cases, is I did that work. And then because of my reputation and such, and I did have a website and my blog and my other marketing tactics, I was able to get cases and referrals, and it went from 30 cases to 60 to 90 to 100 and blah, blah, blah. And it grew exponentially to the point that we went from just referrals to then getting into everything else, where we're a matter of buying leads or LSAs now, SEO certainly, our GBP. We went through the transition from Google Business Profile, to Google My Business, the 3-pack, the 6-pack, whatever you want to call it, all those different things. We've taken that wild ride with Google over the years to where we are now. And now we have a combination of online ads, We do some regular advertising with billboards and such, and some car wraps and those kind of things, and then just word of mouth, and then speaking engagements and such.
And that's a great way to do it. I mean, clearly you have some brand recognition out there, having your face, having your name associated with personal injury in your area is huge. I mean, it sounds like pretty much anywhere somebody could look, they could see the Groth Law name. And once your law firm gets to that point, it becomes natural to think about, well, what is the next step? What is the next step for growth? And for your firm, obviously, what we're talking about today is the acquisition of another law firm. But had that always been a consideration, or did it come about more organically?
Boy, I want to say it was organically, but um, in preparing for this, I was trying to go back in my memory banks. There were talks over the years about joining with other firms. And should we join a different firm and have a partnership? So it's, Smith and Groth, or Groth and Smith, or something like along those lines. Um, and I go back to remembering from my clerkship at a personal injury firm, and there was an attorney there who said, I have partners. I love my partners. I wish I didn't have partners. That it would be much easier if it was just me, because of, I guess obvious reasons. You can steer the ship. You don't have to have, direction by committee, or leadership by committee, things like that. But so with that, I know over the years we were approached by different people to join different firms. We were approached by different people about expanding our practice to different types of areas of law, and we made a conscious effort to stick with personal injury law and to be just a Groth law firm and not bring on additional partners, or join other firms, I should say, and have a practice built that way. So there was I guess to answer your question about acquisition or about acquiring this firm, the firm we acquired, they reached out to us because we had talked years ago about joining, because the partners at that firm were getting older and they had kind of their exit strategy in place. And back then, in about 2011 and 12, maybe ish, they were thinking, okay, in 5, 10 years, we may want to retire. So if we get somebody in here who's a younger attorney who will join us, and it'll be, instead of 3 names on the door, it'll be 4 names on the door, and then he'll take it over. That's how I guess we were introduced a number of years ago. And then fast forward to 2020, I believe, they reached out again and said, okay, none of our associates wanted to take over the firm. We still have associates. They want to just be associates, which is fine. So we need to find somebody who wants to take over the firm. So now we're coming back to you, John, and what do you think? And then we had a long conversation about what that all means. So it kind of happened organically, just again by networking and keeping the options open, keeping the doors open. And luckily, somebody walked out the door one day, but came back years later, and we were able to make hopefully a better option for them, and a good option for us.
And that's a really interesting consideration that I don't know that most people think through, where you see so many law firms out there that have, the multiple names attached to it, but truly having too many cooks in the kitchen can just be a nightmare when it comes to joining another firm. So knowing who you are, knowing who you want to serve, knowing essentially what your corporate culture is, what your values are, and really believing in that and not having to expand beyond that is a great reason to acquire as opposed to merge with another firm. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that that was something that you were really steadfast with, and it made for a great business decision for you down the road after sticking to your guns on that. So let's talk about this firm in particular. What was appealing about this firm other than the prior relationship that you already had in place?
Yeah, well, they were around forever. The firm is Samster, Conkle, and Safran, and James Samster was a powerhouse in personal injury in Wisconsin in probably 60s, 70s, and 80s. So long time. And Jerry Conkle was a attorney well known in the personal injury world in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And John Safran, the same thing. He was a very highly respected individual. He sadly passed away before we purchased the firm, but they had some really um, well-known and well-publicized police brutality cases. So that was interesting because we didn't do, Groth Law Firm didn't do police brutality, but their website had a lot of backlinks for a lot of stories, which were high-value backlinks, as I'm sure you talk about frequently, with media and such all across the nation and world, really. So that was kind of fascinating. When you do a Ahrefs or a Moz or whoever, search. I don't know who you use, but I was always a Ahrefs kind of guy. And you look at what their backlink compositive, what their backlink, what's the right word? Backlink.
Backlink profile.
The profile thing. The profile was pretty impressive. So with that, it was such that, we looked at it. They have a long history, well respected. They did personal injury work. So that was kind of pretty easy. Then it was just a matter of looking at the books and figuring out, is it profitable, and will it work out that them joining us, how can we grow together, and will we work together? And that was, there were some growing pains, which is fine. Some people, like you said before, with the culture, some people were great, others were not. And we gave them all options, and they everybody came over, and then after a few years, some people left and other people stayed, and we've now hired other attorneys to help manage the very unique practice area, which is the vaccine practice that I didn't even know of until we purchased Samster, Conkle, and Safran.
Right. And with that vaccine practice, it's administering injuries resulting from vaccine administration with prisoners, correct?
Well, yeah, it's people all across the United States. I mean, we have people who are who get, I think, improperly vaccinated while they're in custody, if they're in prison or not. We have people who are going to the local Walgreens, going to CVS or whichever pharmacy, and they get a vaccination. So it's something that was new to us, but once you look at it, you realize that there are, it's the old thing of supply and demand. There are not many lawyers admitted to the U.S. Court of Federal Claims that can help injured victims from vaccines. There are a lot more personal injury lawyers, probably hundreds of thousands, well, maybe not, tens of thousands more personal injury lawyers than there are vaccine personal injury lawyers. So it's like, well, with that, we can pretty easily become a regional player in the vaccine world. And because of the reputation of Jerry Conkle, luckily in his firm, that made an easy transition. And he has been a fantastic teacher, and he has helped us learn how to manage those cases, how to help our clients, and work through the system.
And that is, speaking to the development of whether to acquire another firm and bringing on more leads, that is another area that a lot of people don't necessarily consider, where you have one personal injury firm acquiring another personal injury firm. It's, if you're in the same city, you're just taking up more real estate for cases that are already existing, that are already in the particular silo that you already serve. But if you're acquiring another firm that has different case types than anything that you've even been exposed to, that has exponential value in terms of the types of cases and the quantity of cases that you can bring in. So you're not competing against yourself in the long run. You're really casting a wider net in a very true form.
Yeah. I agree. You're
And
right.
so there were clearly a lot of things that you looked at in terms of the relationships that you already had in place, the reputation of the lawyers, and the other types of cases that you'd be able to bring in with this. But how else did you assess whether or not this was a good business decision to acquire the firm? What are some of the metrics that you looked at?
Well, we luckily had the ability, having doing or having practiced personal injury law for decades, we had the ability to come in and look at cases on a literally case by case basis, confidentially, and figure out, okay, what is it going to take for us to have uh, these 10 cases finalized? Are we going to put some in suit? Are we going to have to do X, Y, and Z? What's the value of the case? Things like that. And do we have really the capacity at Groth Law Firm to make it a worthwhile decision to take on all these cases? So that was one of the things we had to do was just simply look at every single case and figure out whether it was worthwhile to take the case on. There were some cases that were police brutality cases that we said no, where it's a federal case that we really can't handle. And then there were some cases we had to refer out to different law firms, or our recommendation was we're not going to handle it, we're going to refer it out. And that would be a different situation. And that was a conversation with the managing attorney of Samster, Conkle, and Saffron as to how we wanted to handle that scenario. And then there was learning really at that point with the number of vaccine cases that they had. What does it take to move these cases forward, and what's the time on desk? How long will we be sitting with this? And in personal injury, how many thousands of dollars in costs will we be advancing? So it's not just whether we can have staff that will be able to manage these cases, but then how much more money will it take to advance the costs for all these potentially dozens and hundreds of clients going forward. And that was something that luckily we had a good team here that could look through that. Our bookkeeper, our accountant was very, very helpful. And they had an attorney who was almost like a broker, who was very helpful in getting information and having documents upon documents. And their system was set up in such a way, they use Needles, we use Filevine, but their Needles case management system was easy for us to manage because I had used Needles at my old firm. So we understood really what we were looking at, where the kind of the KPIs were in Needles, so we could make an informed decision about what it would take to push a case forward and get it to the end.
And those are all important things to look at as you're looking to acquire a firm. Clearly, most of us can, look at the process and see the advantages to buying the firm, knowing that you're going to be having more cases coming in, you're going to immediately have a bigger caseload. But it is important to look at those financial obstacles as well, and assess how much is this going to cost, not just in the acquisition of the firm itself, but in order to serve their existing clients well, get those existing cases to the finish line, and know that there is still going to be some lag before you see profit on a rather large ongoing investment.
Yeah.
And so, were there any other unexpected financial obstacles that you encountered during the acquisition?
Well, so for example, we we've hired different team members over the years, and they've come from firms where they only use Word, right? I mean, that's just team members, paralegals, settlement specialists, and things like that. They're not bringing cases with them, but you have a lag of time where you're spending a week, 2 weeks in the training, so they're not being productive for that first couple of weeks because the training may have to last longer because there's a big learning curve. With this transition from Needles to Filevine, one of the things that we had to consider is, okay, how are we going to transition the files? and then how long do we have to pay for the Needles server, because Needles is on a server. It wasn't Neos, it was Needles. So then it's like, okay, well, we're transitioning, or we don't have a server because we're in the cloud with FileVine. So it was those things like, okay, um, having a Microsoft server, how long then will we have to manage that server, our IT costs on a monthly basis and a yearly basis for however many years, and is it easier for us to take all the Needles cases, put them into FileVine, or is it easier to just keep Needles by having a server? All those different things were kind of the nuts and bolts of the transition that I didn't expect, but I realized pretty quick that it was going to be a bigger deal. And really, what we did was we immediately said, okay, start printing. Just print out whatever you can, like fact sheets, so we can understand, just in case something happens in the transition when we're moving from that office to this office. At least we have something in writing, something in paper. So if a computer gets dropped or whatever would happen, we'd be able to save that vital information. That was something that I think it's obvious, but you don't think about it. You don't think about, well, what if you're in the cloud and they're not? I guess I'm somewhat tech savvy, but not that much that I can think 6 moves ahead.
Well, and sometimes you just have to abandon the tech savviness and just get right back to basics, and printing everything out and it is one of the most secure ways that you can make sure that you have that record. Because God forbid something happened to it during the transition. I mean, that would just be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And so, even just the ability to think through these and the time it takes to print out all of these documents during the transition, figuring out the logistics of merging these two entities together, is a huge lag. And with any lag, you're going to have expenses, and that draws out kind of everything else. Clearly, I am hoping that you had some support during this whole process. But how involved was the previous owner with the transition itself?
Um, Very, very helpful. Certainly very, very helpful. This was they did a good job in they were forecasting, Jerry especially was forecasting how long he wanted to kind of stay around. And I think most lawyers will forecast, let's say, 3 years, but it's really 4 because you just can't give it up, that kind of thing. I think that's pretty common. And he had forecasted a number of years, and then afterwards he stayed around, and we still see him. He comes in with his dogs from time to time, and we get a, a nice kind of therapy dog to come in to pet and play with. But he was very, very involved. His office was right next to mine. His lead paralegal was right outside our office. Very, very helpful in that regard. And it was nice to have another person with more experience than me for all of our younger attorneys to go to, and all of our staff to go to and ask questions of. That was a really maybe an unrealized benefit, something that I think we were aware of, but um, we didn't know what we were missing. We had attorneys at the time who were very experienced, but always having a different perspective is always going to help. The rising tide is going to raise all those ships. So that was nice, and it was helpful, I think, for our younger attorneys and our staff, just to get a different perspective as to how to do things. So I will always be grateful for him for all the time that he gave us, and certainly all the time that he continues to give us. He's not here a lot, but he does answer his phone whenever I call, so that's great.
Well, just knowing that he's there now, as a resource, as somebody that you can call, it both helps from a legal perspective. It helps you serve your clients well, but it also brings some continuity as you are transitioning a staff. And if you have a 3-year plan where you still have leadership involved and kind of gradually phasing out, I'm sure that can help with a lot of the human aspect of this transition
Hmm.
as well. Was there anything in particular that you did that helped the employees at the other firm shift to the new leadership?
Anything in particular we did? Um, I think one of the, I guess the main things was, or the easiest things was, is it was personal injury to personal injury. I mean, there's very few options of how you're going to handle a file. And the nice thing was having Jerry involved, that we didn't have to have uh, a change in tactics right away. The other thing was we had paralegals on staff at the time who had a long history of working with needles, so they could work together to understand, okay, I understand your frustration with needles, and I understand your frustration from going from a server to a cloud-based system. I've been there, done that. Let's work on this together. So that was more of a right place, right time. And we certainly encouraged that, that cooperation. I can't take credit saying, well, that's what I planned on, because it just happened organically, like you said before. Um, but having everybody in the same building was great. I think it was interesting that this happened during COVID, and we had uh, a lot of people who did not want to work from home. We had many people who could, well, we all could, but we had many people who did not want to work from home. So it was, they even, I think, felt better about coming to the office, because they felt like, every day was a Saturday or Sunday. Like they were getting, extra credit every single day for being in the office. And they had that camaraderie that, okay, we're in it together. And I think that helped out.
That does help so much. And I mean, my company is 100% remote. And it is a challenge for some people, where you need a little bit of camaraderie. You need to be able to get together and brainstorm certain ideas. And if you're working on a project together, there's something special about being in a physical space together. And I, commend your employees for acknowledging that about themselves and taking the initiative to band together to go through this transition.
Yeah.
Um, were there any other big surprises, positive or negative, that came out of acquiring another firm?
Any big surprises? Well, I think the now the continued surprise, honestly, is and this is hopefully not, don't take this as me trying to um, talk more about SEO, but um, I know you love SEO
I
stuff,
do
but
love SEO. You can talk
uh,
about
I
SEO as
I
much as
know.
you want.
And this is not intentional, just because I'm on your podcast, but it's fascinating to me. I guess the biggest surprise is, it's 2024, and it's been years, and their website, we've done very, very little with it. It's still out there. It's skslawyers.com. Um, our website is growthlawfirm.com, but just to see the number of potential clients that go to that website for certain specialties that they had. Even this week, we've gotten, I could probably pull it up. I know it's at least a handful, which to me is shocking when we've done nothing, almost nothing to their website, but just because of the backlinks and the SEO that they had for years, uh, that's a train that was really hard to stop, obviously, because
Yeah.
it's still running. So that's really kind of the most surprising thing, and it goes back to, okay, uh, if you're a proponent of SEO, that should be right there. The proof's in the pudding that it works, and it'll work not only today and tomorrow, but again, it's a long game, like everybody says. And I am the first one that'll admit, or the first one that can show the longevity of that game is now years. I mean, things that were done back in 2010s are still producing for me in November of 2024. Wow.
It's an incredible investment. And I mean, not to, go down the SEO rabbit hole, But once you have a very powerful site that has decent content on it that is helping people who have questions about a particular type of case, that stays with you forever. And yes, there are going to be other law firms out there that are competing for the same search terms and taking up additional real estate on Google. But once you have a solid foundation and you have a reputation behind it, that's something that will last,
Mhm.
and is 100,000% worth the investment year over year.
Yeah.
So I love to hear that that is an investment that they made that you are now benefiting from and seeing the rewards for that. So let's talk a little bit about the future. What are your future plans now that you've expanded your practice through this acquisition? Do you see yourself acquiring any additional law firms in the future?
Do you know anyone that wants to be purchased? Yes, please. Come on down. No, I mean seriously, um, I think it's something that we always have to consider. And I am for a while on my LinkedIn, I had that we're always hiring, always purchasing, that kind of thing. I think it's an option that we've learned is not as difficult as you would think. Um, I think it's something that it's a matter of a growth strategy to, no pun intended, but I think it's certainly a possibility, and hopefully it's a probability. In the future, uh, I'm I think I consider myself relatively young. We have, I think, decades more that we can uh, help out clients. I don't think cars are going to be that safe in any time soon. I think we're going to be able to help people based on our car practice, our single event, our mass tort, our vaccine practice for many, many years. So, how do I see us growing? I think it's a matter of, intelligent growth with the vaccine practice, getting more involved in mass tort cases to insulate ourselves from what might be coming with cars in the future. And then right now, continue with the brand identity through affinity. And hopefully people will understand that, that if you're injured, you'll think of us because of all the different things we're doing in the community and the billboards and other kind of ways in which we're trying to get our name out there. So, um, yes, I think we're going to continue to expand in the state and then hopefully, regionally.
And it's all about having that growth mindset, not to dig into that
I
pun,
know. Yeah.
but I love it. So what advice would you have for a personal injury lawyer who is considering purchasing another firm?
Go to lunch with the attorneys at the other firm a number of times, get to know them. If you have uh, the luxury of having a long-standing relationship, that's probably where you want to start. But really knowing the culture and knowing the people is probably most important. And then the second thing is have really good advisors. So you have if it's your accountant, if it's your IT team, whoever else it is, so you can show them, okay, this is what's been presented to me. What don't I know? What do you know that you can help me to figure this out? So I'm not surprised 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever from now. And then I'm kicking myself for not knowing that because you really can't know everything. So make sure you have trusted advisors that you can rely on going forward. So you're going into this acquisition with both eyes opened.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you sharing your advice with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.